It's official. The news that everyone knew, the worst kept secret in professional wrestling at the moment, was revealed last night, or this morning rather. Luke Gallows and Karl Anderson announced that they have signed with Impact Wrestling. The Good Brothers have signed with Impact Wrestling, and they are now likely to appear at Slammiversary tonight. Big signing. Expected, of course. Everyone knew that it was happening. Everyone had been speculating about it. Reports had come out that Karl Anderson and Luke Gallows would indeed be heading to Impact Wrestling. It had been teased recently on Impact Wrestling by the likes of Scott D'Amore. It had been teased by Karl Anderson and Luke Gallows recently on social media. Everyone knew, but now it has been confirmed. So last night, or this morning rather, at midnight, once the WWE non-compete clause had expired in their contract, Impact Wrestling put up a post on their official Twitter page. It was a video of Karl Anderson and Luke Gallows. They say it's midnight. Their contract has expired. They were there with a beer. They say that they've both been tested. They were wearing masks. Karl Anderson was wearing a machine gun Karl Anderson mask. And they're having a few beers. They revealed that they're signed with Impact Wrestling. The shot that they had was a close-up on them in the dark, and it pulls away, the lights come on, and it revealed that they are in the Impact Arena, the site of Slammiversary tonight on pay-per-view and, of course, on Fight TV. So as I mentioned, not surprising. Great news, great addition off the top to Impact Wrestling. It's a huge addition. It's a huge get. It's a statement, I think, by Impact Wrestling. Look, they could have gone to AEW. We know that they're going to New Japan also, but this might have been a team that would have not previously gone to Impact Wrestling if they were under different ownership, if they didn't have the money, if they didn't have the buzz that's around them at the moment. It's a great signing. It is a really good signing, and it's a really exciting signing. And this wasn't the only bit of news we got about Luke Gallows and Karl Anderson when it comes to Impact Wrestling, and it comes to their final days in WWE and their negotiations with AEW, their heat with Paul Heyman. There is so much to break down here. That almost transcends Impact Wrestling and goes beyond that. Now, it's interesting because when we've spoken about Luke Gallows and Karl Anderson in the past, we've spoken quite a lot and at length about that they only signed new deals with WWE in 2019. That was the surprising factor as to why they were let go by WWE in the first place. Obviously, a lot of people didn't expect them to be released anyway. They'd just appeared at WrestleMania in the Boneyard match, the main event of WrestleMania of Night 1, The Undertaker's final match, his retirement match with AJ Styles. They had just signed 5-year deal contracts with the company. They were good friends of AJ Styles, who is a prominent player in WWE and a position of power, and this is no slight to the people that did get released by WWE, but Karl Anderson and Luke Gallows they weren't names at the top of people's list to be on the chopping block. Everyone would just assume they're safe. They're reliable guys. They're well-known names. They're big names in Japan. Now they're big names in America. They could go to any company that they wanted. Any company would want Luke Gallows and Karl Anderson. They're not going to suffer for work, and this is evident by the signing to Impact Wrestling. So it was very, very surprising. But Luke Gallows and Karl Anderson, they sat down with Ryan Satin, had an interview about him, about Talking Shopomania, AEW, Impact Wrestling, WWE, Paul Heyman, and there's a lot to break down here. Now, by all accounts, they told Ryan Satin that Gallows and Anderson, they spoke to the Young Bucks back in about 2018 because they heard the rumblings of the stuff that the Young Bucks were doing. Of course, they're good friends from Japan. They are members of the Bullet Club. They'd heard what they could potentially be doing, but they weren't exactly sure as to what the Young Bucks were going to do. So they sat down with them, and the Young Bucks openly told him this is exactly what's going to happen. About Dynamite, this is about 10 months before Dynamite. They were telling them what they're going to do, and quite frankly, Gallows and Anderson, they just didn't believe them. Gallows and Anderson were like, how is this going to happen? And I think that's justified. I mean, how many times have we heard in the wrestling business about promotions that are going to start, we're going to be on TV, we're going to have this, we're going to have that. I mean, professional wrestling history is filled with that kind of, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, and it never happens. Of course, pro wrestling is based on the carnivals. A lot of it is our con jobs. I'm not saying that the Bucks were trying to con Gallows and Anderson, but you can understand their skepticism, especially when they're saying, we're going to be part of this new company, we're getting in Chris Jericho, we're going to be on TNT, we're going to be on prime time on Wednesdays. Even I don't even know if the Wednesday date was confirmed at that point, but you understand my point there. They were a bit like, whoa, this is big. Is it really, really possible? So they continued that as the year went on. They realised both that they wanted to leave. They were nervous about not going on television because they weren't being on TV at the time. They weren't being used at the time. And then this all changes around July when they team with Triple H in Japan. Japan. when they know that Gallows and Anderson, they being WWE, they know that they're an asset. They suddenly realize they're an asset. I would speculate at this point that someone has stooged off to WWE, not only about AEW, but of course they've speculated that Gallows and Anderson could be first to leave WWE to go to AEW, and they could make a big impact against WWE, and WWE at that point are crapping their pants. They're like, oh my gosh, what are Gallows and Anderson going to do? So they have their tour in Japan. Triple H teams with them because Gallows and Anderson are big names in Japan. And then next thing you know, Triple H is calling and texting Luke Gallows and Karl Anderson daily to get them to sign a new deal. And their price kept going up, and Triple H would keep telling them how much he wanted Karl Anderson and Luke Gallows. We really want you. We really want you. And if you read between the lines there, it's not necessarily we really want you to use you, it's we really want you to keep you. You got to remember, this is in 2019 where WWE is aware of AEW. They're not sure necessarily what AEW is, though. How much competition is AEW going to be with us? Forget all the excuses. Forget all the, AEW, we don't look at them as competition. What a load of BS. Of course they look at AEW as competition. Look at what they've done since. They moved NXT to USA Network. They moved it to 2 hours. The Great American Bash was counter-programming to Fyter Fest. It's constant. It's constant. The idea we don't look at AEW as competition. What a load of crap. What a load of crap. And it's the same thing here. They wanted to keep Karl Anderson and Luke Gallows because they could be a threat if they jumped to the other company. And again, I don't have a problem with that. I really don't have a problem with that. It makes business sense. Is it the most ethical and good thing to do? Probably not. Probably not, but it makes business sense. But this idea, AEW, they're not even competition to us. What a load of BS. It's just not true. It is just not true. So they had, as Gallows and Anderson mentioned, they had the meeting with the Young Bucks about AEW. That would have been around December time of 2018. Fast forward to July, and then we have Hunter teaming with them in Japan, telling them, yeah, we want to sign you, want to keep you. And they openly admit that they were dilly-dallying on this deal for about a year. And they walk into Mark Carano, the Executive Vice President of Talent Relations, a year before their deals were up, and he's like, we've got to talk contracts. And they're like, whoa. They thought WWE was going to forget that they were signed because it was during a crazy time, and Gallows and Anderson think we're gonna see it out. We're gonna see it out, and we're gonna see how we feel. But they weren't. WWE, as I just mentioned, were on Karl Anderson and Luke Gallows. They know that they're friends with Kenny Omega and the Young Bucks. They know about the history in Japan. And ultimately, they know that Luke Gallows and Karl Anderson aren't happy. They're not happy with how they're being used. And they suddenly see, whoa, AEW, competition, because that's what it is, competition. And they start going, we need to keep these guys. Regardless of if we're going to use them or not, we need to keep them because if we have them, the competition isn't using them. That's WWE's perspective when it comes to that. And Karl Anderson and Luke Gallows, when they spoke to Ryan Satin, as I mentioned, they're very open. They were hesitant. You know, you're jumping from WWE to something that you don't even know is going to happen. Is it going to be a success? Is it going to be a UWF? You know, what's it going to be? This isn't like an Impact Wrestling where it was established for years. This isn't like a WCW where it's established for years. This was a startup promotion that at that point was just really a name. You know, I don't even know if they done a show yet in July. I think they'd done Double or Nothing maybe in May. But there was excitement there, but they're professional wrestlers. And over their careers, you know, they've heard of the next big thing that's coming. This guy has big money. This is the next alternative. And as they mentioned, they've heard it 9 times out of 10. It never happens. That's the weird thing of AEW, isn't it? Is it was all talk, but they have backed it up. And as they mentioned, it's not a case of they don't trust the Young Bucks. They have all the faith in the world with them. They're best friends with them. But when you're dealing with WWE, who's a publicly traded billion-dollar company, big business, you have to start going, is this going to happen? They're on American television. How much is New Japan going to pay if they don't want to go back to WWE? Is it comparable to the money that they were getting at the time in WWE? And WWE were stacking up the price, the downside guarantee, as Gallows and Anderson mentioned. Their price was going up, up, and up. Triple H is going, we want to keep you, we want to keep you. And when Triple H, who is an icon in the industry and a big player in WWE, and he's saying, this was a quote he said to Gallows and Anderson, which is a guilt trip quote, but he said it. He said, quote, I want this to set you up for the rest of your life, end quote. How do you respond to that? How do you respond to that? Like Luke Gallows says, we're going to make a few $1 million over a few years. How do you turn that down? You know, it's ridiculous. How do you say no to someone who's putting on that charm offensive? It's it's difficult. And by all accounts, there was a bit of heat there. Because of this. AEW and the Bucks and Kenny Omega, they thought that they had the deal with Kyle Anderson and Luke Gallows. They thought it was in the bag. It got so far that the company would even make plans to debut Luke Gallows and Kyle Anderson during the launch episode of AEW Dynamite and TNT. Kyle Anderson says it got to June. There was a text from the Young Bucks. They'd planned out the entire first debut of Dynamite's main event. The machine gun music hits. Out comes Kyle Anderson and Luke Gallows. They do the too sweet to the Young Bucks and Kenny Omega, turn around, turn on them, and that's the end of Dynamite. That's not what we had. Dynamite ended in the end with the Inner Circles formation of Chris Jericho, Sammy Guevara, Jake Hager, and Santana Ortiz. It could have been very, very, very different. Instead, we could have had Luke Gallows, Kyle Anderson making their debut, attacking their former Bullet Club teammates, and then who knows what AEW would look like today. Who knows? And that's the end of the first ever episode of Dynamite on TNT. Think of that historic moment. And Luke Gallows, Kyle Anderson, they turned it down. And they're open. It's the biggest regret of their life. Kyle Anderson said, quote, "It's one of the biggest regrets of my life that it didn't happen. It kills me," end quote. And can you blame him? I mean, just think of the regret that must be there. And I do sympathise with them because I don't think it's their fault, because they made a business decision, and at the time, before April, it would have probably been the right business decision financially and for their family, and that's ultimately what matters. You know, they didn't know it was going to take off on TNT. They knew the guys involved, the Young Bucks, Kenny Omega, Chris Jericho, they're guys that are successful and not going to fail. They knew that AEW, they say, is going to be successful. I don't know if that's completely true. They obviously had their doubts, but as they mentioned, quote, "We just succumbed to the amount of money and promises kept or unkept by WWE," end quote. And to me, this is a latest stage by WWE in that you look at their business practices in the last few years when it comes to talent. It's just not good. I mean, you talk about Mark Carrano there in talent relations and creative. To me, over the last 5 or so years, it just appears that WWE, they can't keep a promise to a talent. And I know plans change, and I know no one's guaranteed anything. But when you're telling people we want you to set you up for the rest of your life, we want to keep you here, and we want to give you good money, you factor into our plans, it's all BS. All they cared about at the time, especially in July 2019 or the summer of 2019, do you recall this? That AEW had a bit of buzz. They had their first Double or Nothing show. There was a lot of talk about AEW and how WWE were going to react, because suddenly they started handing out these 5-year contracts, right, to Gallows and Anderson, to Mike Kanellis and Maria Kanellis. It was what they were doing because they thought, oh my gosh, people are going to go to AEW, their competition, and they just started throwing things out. And it would appear that when they were doing this, they were putting promises that they were never intending to keep. Now, obviously, AEW put an offer to Gallows and Anderson at the time. WWE put an offer to Gallows and Anderson at the time, but there were other offers. They mentioned AEW wasn't throwing chump change at them. It was a good contract and it eats at them. But also, and this is a really interesting point, and I think this opens up quite a lot of eyes about Impact Wrestling, because a lot of people are under the assumption that Impact Wrestling, obviously they're in better ownership than they were under Dixie Carter. They're more financially stable than they've ever been. Impact Wrestling doesn't have money issues anymore. Anthem are a very wealthy company. And Anthem and Impact have got money to throw. They absolutely do. Kyle Anderson said Impact in 2019 offered a really great deal. More money than some of his friends are making now in WWE. That's pretty big news, because a lot of people have speculated that, oh, Impact can't get this person, Impact can't get that person. They can't afford a Rusev. They can. Chris Jericho, at one point before his AEW appearances, his AEW career, openly said he'd agreed with Don Callis in principle. I don't know if they'd spoken about money or contracts, anything like that. He'd spoken to Don Callis about doing maybe a couple of matches of Impact, because they've got the money. They absolutely have the money. So it's interesting. It's really interesting when you look at the financial side of Impact Wrestling and what they're able to offer talent. It's very interesting. Now, Gallows and Anderson, they talk about passing on AEW, and it did lead to some heat, some hurt feelings, some bad blood. And I sympathise with both parties here. For Gallows and Anderson, for 6 months, they told Kenny Omega and the Young Bucks they're coming. No matter what, we're leaving WWE. We hate it here. We're not happy. And they didn't do it. They didn't bet on themselves. They didn't allow themselves to leave because of the money that WWE offered, and they had that element of doubt in their head. Is this going to be right? Is this going to be wrong? What is going on? And they openly say about FTR. They say that they're so glad that FTR got out on their own terms and they're able to what they're doing now. Because there were some hard feelings between people like the Young Bucks and Gallows and Anderson because they trusted each other. They told people they were going to come. Plans were factored in. And you would expect to be able to trust your close friends, right? And I don't know if it comes down to trust. It's money. That's what it comes down to. It's not necessarily to trust. It's to money. And it was a really difficult position for Gallows and Anderson. And I do sympathise. And Gallows says, quote, there was probably a little heat internally there, end quote. It's difficult because not only, I suppose, did they let Kenny Omega and the Young Bucks down, but they're in positions of authority in AEW. They're executive vice presidents. They answer to other people. I suppose they probably told a Tony Khan. They might have even told TNT and Warner Media, look, we're getting Gallows and Anderson in. We're doing this whole Bullet Club reunion. They're going to turn on us. And when it doesn't happen, they look at you, and these are new executives, positions they haven't been in before. People are going to look at you going, really? I mean, you failed on your first sign-in. Is that what you're going to do? And it does look bad. And he says that Gallows and Anderson say that they think they're still a bit offended to them about it. And their answer is to him, it wasn't personal. And I think that's crucial as well. When they're saying that I think he's still offended by it, it makes you wonder whether there was another offer from AEW to Gallows and Anderson here. I don't know if there has been, but you look at it as if to say that they're kind of like, you hurt us once, we're not going to go there again, which sucks. And I don't like to see friendships broken up in the wrestling business. I know friendships, they're a dime a dozen in the professional wrestling business, and ultimately, though, it is a business. It's not show friends, it's show business, as so many people have said, and that's what they say. They say they appreciate the offer, everything that AEW was trying to do for them. It was a business decision. They were looking at a 5-year deal as opposed to a 2-year deal with maybe a 1-year option, which is what they were getting with AEW. And when you start counting up the money that you're going to be making in 5 years' time, especially with, you're getting the quote, you're going to be here for 5 years, there's plans for you, even after that, and you're putting millions and millions of pounds in your bank account, or dollars in this case, in your bank account. When you compare that to the AEW deal, that isn't as long, it is a smaller figure. What can you do? Looking back on it, hindsight's a great thing and a useful thing. Should they have taken the smaller figure? Should they have bet on themselves and gone for something cool? People like Chris Jericho did it. They bet on themselves and he said, you know what, I'm taking the offer, I'm going to do something different. And should they do something cool like they were doing in New Japan? They absolutely said yes. There's egg on their face. They regret it. And they wish they'd taken the offer. But Karl Anderson's case, he's got kids. He's got a wife. How do you justify that? I turned down a lot of money and it wasn't the right thing to do. And I don't think this is a case of like a Jon Moxley. Because people will say, well, what about Jon Moxley? He turned down a bigger contract, etc. Well, Jon Moxley, he openly says he doesn't live a lavish lifestyle. He doesn't have kids. And he didn't have people, that he was going to be factored in with AJ Styles there. Maybe he was going to be factored in with Seth Rollins and Roman Reigns. I know, but it's a case-by-case basis. It really is a case-by-case basis, but it's led to them now being signed with Impact Wrestling, and it's something I'm really looking forward to. I would also like to touch on here, whilst we're talking about Gallows and Anderson and this interview with Ryan Satin, the Paul Heyman heat. Now, we made a video about this on the channel, actually, about AJ Styles' heat with Paul Heyman and the relation of that to Gallows and Anderson being released, and it's very interesting, and I roll my eyes at it. I really do roll my eyes at it. So, in the interview, Gallows and Anderson mentioned that they had a conversation with Paul Heyman after re-signing with the company in July of 2019. They obviously had an issue with a creative decision, and they were told that Paul Heyman would be contacting them. After making contact, Karl Anderson said they had a great talk that led them to think that Paul Heyman, because this is at time July 2019, Paul Heyman's in charge of Raw, but he's just got started. Paul Heyman's Raw would really come into effect around September time, around the premiere time, where Raw had its premiere episode on USA, SmackDown moved to Fox, and all of that sort of stuff. And they were told, Paul Heyman, I'm a fan of you, you're factored in. They had a great chat, and that's what it was. And Luke Gallows also says that Paul Heyman, they had a conversation with once, and this is really important. Paul Heyman told them, quote, if I ever lied to you, go on social media, effing bury me. Effing put me under the dirt, because I effing deserve it. And I want those guys in the locker room to know that I can't effing be trusted, end quote. Now, I've spoken about this before on the AJ Styles Paul Heyman Heat video. Paul Heyman being found out to be a liar is hardly news in 2020. You could go back to 1995 and be told that by anyone that worked for ECW. There is a little bit of sort of shock that, Paul has not evolved at all over the years. He was known to be a liar, slightly slimy, a bit of a con man, a genius, but can he be trusted? No. And obviously things haven't changed when it comes to that. Now, after Luke Gallows and Karl Anderson got released, the tag team say they started asking around to find out the reason as to why they had been released. Since they turned down deals, good deals by AEW to stay. They might have burned bridges with some of their friends. They've got heat with their friends. They stayed with the company. They got given 5-year deals worth millions and millions and millions of dollars. They were factored in. Why have they been released? Why have they been let go of the company, especially after they'd just been the main event of Night 1 of WrestleMania, the acclaimed Boneyard match, the Undertaker's last match, they're with AJ Styles, the OC. It doesn't make any sense. So they're asking around. Why were we released? What's going on? And someone behind the scenes says the releases were, quote, inspired, end quote, by Paul Heyman. So they tell their friend, because AJ Styles is asking the same question. Why were you released? What's going on? What have you heard? They tell AJ Styles, and he confirms this with another person. So he asked Paul to his face about it. Paul Heyman denies it, says, I didn't have anything to do with it. And he gives AJ Styles, he's telling the truth. I didn't have anything to do with the release of Karl Anderson and Luke Gallows. So Luke Gallows and Karl Anderson, they go back to their source, and the source assured them that Heyman wasn't being honest. Because of this, AJ Styles, he goes straight to Vince McMahon for an answer. McMahon told him that Gallows and Anderson were not on his list and confirmed to AJ that it was, quote, was a Paul Heyman thing, end quote, or was a Heyman thing, end quote. They speculate that this was due to them making so much money, but ultimately, at the end of the day, they admit that Vince McMahon made the final call. What a load of BS. I mean, come on. Really? They're going, so... It's Vince McMahon's company. Vince McMahon is the chairman. Vince McMahon is the CEO. Vince McMahon does what he wants. It's Vince McMahon's playbox and it's his toys. If he decides he doesn't want them, he let them go. Vince McMahon saying, well, they weren't on my list, but Paul Heyman. Oh, come on. What a load of rubbish. It's Vince McMahon's decision. And I get it. I get that they're not happy because AJ Styles goes to Paul Heyman and says, well, apparently it's your thing. And he goes, no, that's not the case. And then people say, well, it was. Why? Paul Heyman is on the creative team. He is the executive director of Raw. He works with the writing team to come up with creative. And he's allegedly telling Vince McMahon, you need to cut these guys off. They're making too much money. Why does Paul Heyman doesn't care about that? He cares about creative. He wants to use as many people as he's want. He's not involved in contract negotiations unless it's about creative. Vince McMahon passing the buck. Well, you weren't on my list, pal. But Paul Heyman, he convinced me. When has Paul Heyman convinced Vince McMahon of anything? I mean, come on. It's just, that is the most nonsensical thing. And like when I heard it at the time, to have heat with Heyman, I understand it from AJ's point of view. He thinks that Heyman lied, and Gallows and Anderson, they feel slighted by Heyman because Heyman had said that they factored in plans. But for Vince McMahon to pass the buck, Paul Heyman, like it's Paul Heyman's company. Paul Heyman got fired a couple weeks later. So was Vince really listening to him back then? Because I'm sure he probably had in his mind, we're going to get rid of him. So it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. And AJ Styles then said, I don't want to work with Paul Heyman, I'm going to SmackDown. Vince McMahon said, yeah, that's fine. AJ Styles is on SmackDown now. He's the Intercontinental Champion. And obviously, it's a Vince McMahon decision. It's a Vince McMahon decision. He looked at Gallows and Anderson. He looked at the money they were making. Obviously, times are tough, budgets are tight. He looked at them and he said, they're making too much money, get rid of them. Maybe Paul Heyman said, you know what, okay, maybe that's what we got to do. But it's not Paul Heyman's decision. Why did Paul Heyman have an influence in that? Unless it's creative, unless Paul Heyman's going, look, they're really factored into storylines. But it doesn't matter, it's Vince McMahon's decision. So to blame Paul Heyman for that, calling Paul Heyman a liar is like saying a zebra has stripes. It is what it is. It's true. You know who you're getting in bed with when it comes to that. But to completely blame Paul Heyman, in my opinion, for the release is nonsensical. If you're going to blame someone, blame Vince McMahon. Blame Triple H. Triple H is the one saying, I want to set you up for life. I want to look after your families. Factor in, less than a year later, they're gone from the company. Yeah, that's really set up, Paul. It's really set up there. And Vince McMahon, they weren't on my list. Come on. I mean, I'd have heat with Paul Heyman if I was Gallows and Anderson, but I'd have more heat with Triple H and Vince McMahon. They're the ones responsible for this, because Triple H lied. I want to set you up for the rest of your lives. I want to look after your family. They stopped them from doing something cool. They burnt bridges with their friends. They got heat with their friends. And then they were let go. And then instead of Vince McMahon and Triple H taking responsibility for lying, they blame it on Paul Heyman, who they fire a couple weeks later. So he was a scapegoat. It's obvious Paul Heyman was a scapegoat. It's Paul Heyman's fault, but he's no longer working in an executive position, so it doesn't matter. Do me a favour. Do me a favour. It's just, it's ridiculous. It is ridiculous. Now, they've also released an official poster for Talking Chopper Mania, Gallows and Anderson, which is on August 1st on Fight TV. The poster does actually have several current Impact Wrestling talents working the event also. On the poster you have Willie Mack, of course, the current X Division champion. You also have Johnny Swinger on there. You have Rhino, who's currently working with Impact Wrestling, in addition to Gallows and Anderson. You've also got some names that have been linked to Impact Wrestling too. You've got Brian Myers is on the poster. Mike Bennett and Maria Kanellis are on there. They've been rumoured to go to Impact Wrestling. So the names on there, Heath Slater too, who is next to Rhino. I mentioned about potentially Slater and Rhino working in Impact Wrestling in the future. So possibly these names, Heath Slater, Mike Bennett, Brian Myers, they could all be going to Impact Wrestling in the future. Maybe this is a sign that they will be. It looks like it's not a full cross promotion, Talking Shopper Mania with Impact Wrestling and Gallows and Anderson, but we know that there is some crossover when it comes to that, so it'll be interesting to see with that. So I'm really excited, like I mentioned, to get off my ranting about Gallows and Anderson's negotiations with AEW and WWE departure. It's a really exciting move. I think Impact Wrestling have done a phenomenal job in signing Gallows and Anderson. I'm really excited to see what happens tonight at Slammiversary. We will be doing a watch-along for Slammiversary tonight on the channel, so be sure to join. I'll be setting up the stream shortly, so you can set reminders for the stream later on. But I roll my eyes at the Paul Heyman Heat story. I think it's a shame about the AEW situation with them. It would have been a great spot that obviously didn't work out for them. I'm glad that they're with Impact Wrestling now. I don't think going to AEW would have been the right move for them. And it's a really exciting time. Did they bring back Aces and Eights? Obviously, Gallows was part of Aces and Eights. Karl Anderson wasn't, but he was part of the Bullet Club, which some speculate that Aces and Eights was part of the formation in Bullet Club in New Japan. That's up to your opinion or viewpoint on that. But again, great signing by Impact Wrestling. And look, they're going to be at Slammiversary tonight. It wasn't actually said in this announcement video, but they've signed with the company. Things are official. The Good Brothers are heading to Impact Wrestling. So very exciting. But what are your thoughts? Of course, this is just one man's opinion. What are your thoughts on the signing of the Good Brothers, Luke Gallows and Karl Anderson, to Impact Wrestling? Do you think it's good? Bad? What would you like to see him do in Impact Wrestling? What do you think they're going to do tonight at Slammiversary? What are your thoughts on Gallows and Anderson's negotiations with AEW in 2019? Do you think WWE lied to them? Do you think they set them up? Do you blame Gallows and Anderson for turning the offers down and taking the money? What are your thoughts on that? And what are your thoughts on the Paul Heyman Heat situation with Gallows and Anderson? Do you think that it's Vince McMahon using Paul Heyman as a scapegoat? Do you think AJ Styles and Gallows and Anderson should have heat with Paul Heyman, or is the one they should have heat with Vince McMahon and Triple H? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I'll be sure to interact with all of you guys down there. I really enjoy chatting with all of you. Be sure to give us a like on this video too, and be sure to share and subscribe. You can do that by clicking the bottom right hand corner of the screen right now, or if you wait a few seconds, there'll be a subscribe button at the end of this video, along with another video for you to watch as always. We're on the road to 500 subscribers. The aim, as always, as I keep mentioning, is 1,000 subscribers. Once we get to 1,000, we'll be doing watch-along streams all the time for Raw, SmackDown, AEW, possibly even Impact as well. So the quicker we get to 1,000, that's what we'll do. Obviously, we're still going to do watch-alongs for pay-per-views, but it's just easier for the TV shows once we get to 1,000 subscribers. So the quicker we get there, the more content we can put out, and I'm really excited to do that. I really appreciate everyone that's subscribed so far. I'm stunned that anyone wants to listen to me talk about wrestling, so I really, really do appreciate it. You can follow us on all of our social media platforms. They're on the screen right now too. It's at 365Wrestle on Twitter and at WrestleNews365 on Facebook and Instagram. Thank you very much for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today, and I'll speak with you again very, very soon.
Hey guys, thank you for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today. Be sure to click on the video on the right there to watch our next video, or click the bottom there to subscribe, or the bottom right hand corner. Thank you very much, and I'll speak to you again very soon.